Conflict in relationships isn't just inevitable, it's necessary. But what separates healthy, thriving relationships from the struggling ones is how couples handle it. In today's episode, we're diving into the cycle that all relationships go through: harmony, disharmony, and repair, and why mastering the art of repair is the key to a lasting connection. Up next on Master Your Marriage.
Welcome back to a new episode.
Yeah,
We're excited to be here.
It's about time we start talking about repair. We've been talking about all the mistakes that we made for the past couple of months.
Right.
So I'm glad to get into this part.
So let's start with a thought. So if you plan to be together for a long time, if you want your relationship to go the distance, then you better get good at repair.
Ooh, okay.
So this is going to be the first episode in a mini series that we're going to be doing all about the repair process. And today we're going to lay the groundwork, talk about why it's so important. And we're going to cover the first step of repair. Then over the next 2 weeks, we'll be diving a little deeper and deeper into repair and exactly how to do it.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's start with something that I find actually really fascinating. A lot of people have this deeply troubling idea that a healthy relationship, like what a healthy relationship should look like, should always be happy, never any conflict. But that's actually not true, right? And here's the thing. Relationships, this is going to be hard to hear, relationships don't end because conflict happens. Conflict actually doesn't destroy relationships. Conflict is a necessary part of in your relationship, but there's some other things that we can learn from conflict.
Have you always known this?
I mean, I don't know that I've always known this, but and I'm gonna dig back into the archives like 35 or 36 years. I dated a girl once who, as we're getting together, she's like, "Oh, we should never have a disagreement." And when we would, she would just be withdrawn and sullen and sad. And I think her parents didn't have a very good relationship. And I think so she saw their struggle. And I think so what she took from that was like, well, I don't want a disagreement because I see my parents disagreeing.
Yep.
But what she was seeing, and as we're going to talk about in this episode, she was seeing the lack of repair.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I know this definitely sounds like a little bit of a crazy assertion, but no relationship has ever been broken by conflict itself. What ends relationships is when people don't know how to navigate conflict appropriately and they don't know how to repair from it, as you just explained.
Absolutely.
Okay. So these are skills, you guys. These are skills that we can develop, and they're skills that a lot of people just don't have. And honestly, I think that's because most of us didn't really grow up in homes where we got to see these skills in action, as she didn't.
Yeah, she didn't see it. And you know what? I don't think I saw it growing up either.
Right.
I just knew that we were two different people. And that different people are going to have different ideas. And that is going to be the beginning of conflict.
Right. Is recognizing that.
Yeah. Recognizing the fact that we have different ideas. So we're going to have conflicts. We need to learn to repair from it. Right.
Right.
So how many of us watched, and I want you to think about this, how many of us know adults or watched our parents openly express a perspective, right? While letting other people express the same perspective, right? Allowing one another the freedom to express their perspective.
Right.
I don't think we grew up with that. I don't think that's happening a lot even today.
No.
Adults letting other adults
have an opinion.
Yeah. And that can be dangerous, right? What we see now is a lot of defensiveness, a lot of lashing out, right? In the case of your parents, one parent shrinking into the one down position while the other one dominated from the one up position. I'm right, you're wrong, taking the moral high ground.
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
It's really rare to grow up in a home where parents brought their concerns to the table, even though they were different perspectives, right? Different realities, then worked through those different concerns like adults, and then repaired those little ruptures from those little conversations along the way. I think that's not something that most of us were blessed with.
No. And here's the truth, and it's probably surprising that healthy relationships actually don't have less conflict. So spoiler alert, they probably have more conflict.
Okay. This is something we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why would healthy relationships have more conflict?
Well, I think it's because healthy couples know how to handle conflict, and unhealthy couples, they sort of, in unhealthy relationships where they lack the skills,
right?
They don't know how to repair.
Yeah.
And when you don't know how to repair, what happens is resentment builds and builds until it blows up into one great big rupture, one great big fight. And what they needed were those smaller, consistent conversations along the way.
Yeah.
But they didn't have those. So small opportunities to repair. Right. I always say small conversations are better than big conversations.
Right.
So once you have this big thing, it makes repair a lot more challenging.
Right. So this is the truth that we kind of all need to start to wrap our heads around. What Robert's talking about is that conflict is inevitable and repair is part of that process. And so we better learn how to do it really well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Did you know that Dr. John Gottman, who we talk about all the time on the show and who also spent nearly 50 years studying couples, he found that all couples have conflict, not a surprise. But not only that, most of them argued about the same things over and over, year after year, for their entire marriage. In fact, even in the best marriages, 69% of the disagreements that couples would have were perpetual.
Yeah, that means these couples are just like the rest of us. We're having the same disagreements.
Yep.
They just keep cropping up. And these couples were having the same disagreements year after year, decade after decade. And even the happiest couples continue to have the same old conversations over and over. So what happened in these sort of masters, these happy couples, is they didn't necessarily avoid conflict.
Right, exactly.
Right. They just chose to have a lot of the small conversations with lots of repair opportunities.
Yes.
Before the rift became too big.
And the resentment was just too massive.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about that. So here's the truth, right? So when you pick your partner, you're also sort of picking the type of conflicts that you'll be having, right? For the rest of your life. You're never going to pick somebody that won't give you conflict.
No.
Right? The only choice you really have is you get to choose what type of conflict you're going to have.
I love that. And it's not supposed to be that way where you're trying to choose someone who you can avoid conflict with. That's not how it's supposed to work. Conflict actually has a positive purpose. We need it, right? And I think it's important to have that framework when we're thinking about conflict, that we actually need it. It pushes us to grow and mature, and it sharpens our ability to have empathy and compassion. I mean, think about it. Would you have as much empathy or compassion for people if you hadn't been forced into like developing that muscle in relationships? No, I think we would all be way more selfish, right?
Yeah. And think about the echo chamber that exists when you're that selfish.
Yeah. Right. My way. It's just always I'm right.
Yeah.
Right. And we would never also learn to, I think, truly love someone like deeply, like learn how to love someone well. I don't think we could do that without conflict.
Yeah.
And I don't think we would learn how to seek understanding of another human if we didn't have conflict. So, I mean, think of it. Without conflict, we'd never develop that deep, mature love that we all want.
Yeah, it's amazing what conflict can bring, right? This understanding.
When you think of it that way, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about repair, because that's the episode, right? Repair is the process of addressing the conflict and then restoring the connection between the two individuals.
Wait, say that again.
It's all about restoring the connection between the two people.
Okay.
Right? And here's something important. If you actually don't need to wait for the fight to be over to begin the repair process. You can repair in the middle of the conversation, right in the middle of the conflict. You can start repairing.
Yes, yes. In fact, I love this idea. And I think maybe it was John Gottman that maybe first shared this thought, that you could just get up in the middle of a conversation and go get the other person a treat or a cup of coffee or a glass of water, or maybe say a kind word, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be all negative in a conflict. Imagine that.
Yeah, it's a great pattern interrupt too.
It is. It is. Yeah. In fact, repairing early and often in those conflict conversations really leads to the best outcomes. So even in the middle of a disagreement, even when you feel like you're starting to get heated, that's probably the best time to do it, actually.
Yeah.
You can be thinking to yourself, okay, what could I do right now that would restore connection? So like you said, the definition of repair is to restore connection. What can I do right now to restore connection?
Yeah. And even in our perpetual conflicts, because 69% of problems are perpetual, even in our perpetual conflicts, we try to make light of them just as a way to diffuse the situation. We'll just look at each other and say like, oh, we're doing this one again.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we're doing this one again. All right.
Let's rumble.
Yeah. We already know how it's going to come out. Yeah. We are going to, try to see each other's point of view and still hold their own point of view.
And find a win-win.
And find a win-win for both of us. And then maybe get a drink afterwards or something.
Right. Go out to dinner.
Yeah.
And I love humor. That's what you're talking about. When you talk about like making a little bit light of something, and because we've been married for almost coming up 33 years, like we can have a little bit more humor, I think, now in our conflict conversations than maybe we used to be able to.
Yeah, without a doubt. Right. So what does the research then say about the importance of repair? Like, why is that super important?
Right. So failure to repair is one of Dr. John Gottman's 8 predictors for divorce. And so since it's been a little while since we've actually gone through all 8 of those predictors for divorce, I think maybe we could run through them. But basically, for those of you who haven't heard some of our earlier episodes, John Gottman followed these couples. It was a longitudinal study that went on for, tracking these couples for the life of their marriage.
Yeah.
And he was able to predict with 94+% accuracy which couples would stay together, which ones would end up in divorce. And these are the 8 predictors. Do you want to start us off?
So number 1 is negativity to positivity ratio, right? So more negativity than positivity during conflict, with a ratio of 0.8, so less than 1 to 1, instead of the healthy conflict, right? The masters are doing 5 to 1, and that is positive to negative. So even in the middle of a disagreement, the master couples, the ones who are happy and have a great relationship, are interjecting 5 positive things for every 1 negative thing.
Which is partly that repair that we're talking about
so they're
in the middle of it.
Working on repair in the middle of that conversation. So the negative, the ones who aren't doing well, are less than 1 to 1.
Correct.
So it's more negative than positive. So mostly negative comments with a little bit less.
Yeah. And negativity and positivity is really a general umbrella, but we've talked a lot about like those losing strategies of some of the specific ways that we do negativity. Yeah. But just as a whole, if you're thinking about a 5 to 1 ratio, you're going to need to be injecting a lot of humor and kindness and love and repair right into the middle of a conflict.
Yeah, in order to stay positive on that. All right. Number 2. So escalation, or any escalation of the 4 horsemen, which are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Mm-hmm. Okay, those are the 4.
Yep.
Number 3, emotional disengagement and withdrawal. This is when bids for connection are repeatedly rejected, right? Number 4, we call this negative sentiment override, when negativity clouds your view of the partner, which basically means they can't seem to do anything right, whether they're in conflict or not. Like your partner walks in the door and you're like, your shirt's untucked, you're a mess, you're late. You just
see all the bad.
Yeah, you only see the bad. You can't see that he's got, dinner coming right behind him in his other hand that he went and got for the family kind of a thing, right?
So those are the first 4.
Those are the first 4.
The next 4, number 5. So the next one is chronically getting flooded. Yeah. So this is really a lot of what we talk about on the podcast here about the importance of self-regulation. We got to work on that self-regulation during conflict. Otherwise, couples are getting chronically flooded. Number 6 is staying in that hyper aroused state, which means kind of staying in that fight or flight state. Again, this is a failure to self-soothe, a failure to self-regulate, which leads couples into this constantly trying to either flee or aggress or pursue or withdraw.
Yeah, I always say your neurology is spun up.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Right.
Number 7 is not accepting influence. So you're letting your perspectives dominate. You're not willing to let your partner's ideas shape your perspectives at all. And Absolutely. Then finally, number 8, the last predictor for divorce. And again, remember, these predict relationship success with 94 to 95% accuracy. Number 8 is the failure of repair attempts, which of course brings us back, circling back to today's topic, right?
Right. So what we're saying is that repair is vital to a healthy relationship and a necessary part of conflict. So we have to repair, right? All right. So let's dive into what repair looks like in the day-to-day rhythm of our relationships.
Perfect. So there's a researcher by the name of Ed Tronick, Tronick. And he is best known for his studies on infants with their caretakers. And the thing I love that I get from him is that all relationships have a rhythm. Every relationship, whether it's between a baby and their caretaker or whether that's between 2 partners, every relationship goes through a natural cycle of harmony, disharmony, and repair. So harmony is obviously when you feel connected, right? It's when you feel aligned. It's when you feel in sync. Disharmony is when conflict arises. but now you feel a little disillusioned, sort of disconnected. And then repair, as Robert defined earlier, is the process of restoring connection, getting back on the same page. And so again, that cycle is harmony, disharmony, repair, connection, disconnection, repair. It's the rhythm of closeness, rupture, and then return to closeness, harmony, disharmony, repair, again and again and again and again.
I like that. I like sort of this rhythm, because if you understand that your relationship has this rhythm, then you're not so surprised.
Correct.
Right. And I think you can kind of help it along.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Instead of getting stuck, instead of getting stuck on this disharmony, like, oh, we're stuck here in this valley, when you realize,
or this is over, our relationship must be over because we hit a valley.
Right. Instead of like, this is what we're supposed to, instead of asking the question, what can we learn from this? How can I learn more and be better? Mm-hmm. Gain empathy, gain understanding, gain compassion.
Yeah.
Like instead of picking those things up at the bottom to help you move along. And I would suggest that the better you get at repair, the more shallow that dip in the cycle would be.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So this is important because society doesn't teach us this, right? This may be the first time you've even heard it, right? And we've learned that, that most of us have this idea that a good relation should just be all harmony, all highs and no lows. But that's not realistic, right? Because again, we're two different people. And because society doesn't talk about how disillusionment is a normal part of the process that couples go through. And couples can get really confused when this happens, especially if they're not ready or understanding that there's going to be ups and downs in their relationship.
And like I said a minute ago, I think a lot of people hit that and go, oh, well, I guess we're over. We're doomed.
Well, yeah, much like the girl that I was dating, like, oh, that's it. We had an argument. We're over.
So this cycle of harmony, disharmony, and repair happens both. This is interesting. It happens on a macro level and on a micro level. So it's happening on a macro level out over years, right? Even it plays out over decades. And that's why you've probably heard Robert and I kind of joke about this, how we've been married to each other 3 times. Not really. We've just gone through 3 different relationships with each other because we've gone through this cycle of harmony, disharmony, repair on this large scale over decades.
Yeah.
But it also, that same pattern can happen 10 times during a single conversation over dinner where there's that harmony, disharmony, repair.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the hopeful part about understanding this sort of this rhythm, right? It means that even couples who've been stuck for years can learn to move through these cycles more consciously and then even more deliberately.
I love that. I love that. So there's a video on YouTube that I think everybody should watch. I think it's really cool, super fascinating, also a little bit upsetting, a little unsettling. And it's called the Still Face Experiment with Ed Tronick. So he's that researcher I mentioned a moment ago. And in a just 2-minute video, you can see the entire cycle of harmony, disharmony, and repair play out between a mother and her 11-month-old baby in this research lab. And so why don't you tell us what happens?
Well, I was going to say, I didn't find it that disturbing. I was a little bit sad when the baby had lost connection.
Oh, I kind of broke my mom heart for a minute.
Yeah. But I don't think it should be just, I don't think you should run away from it. I think it's instructive.
Yes, fair.
It really is.
Yes.
All right. So the video starts with the baby sitting in a high chair, sort of facing mom. And you can see the connection between mom and baby immediately, which is something that often happens, right? The baby's sort of pointing at things and trying to get her mom to look, and mom's like looking, and they're fully engaged. They're smiling, they're playing, and they're responding. And there's this sort of this amazing connection, right? Where you can see that intentions are clear, and this is what the baby is used to, right? Mom has, they've engaged in this play.
They've played like this before.
This is a normal thing. Yeah.
And so then the researchers ask the mom to stop responding. And so the mom, just for a moment, turns her back. And then when she turns back around, she's completely expressionless, totally still-faced, no smiles, no reaction. And the baby immediately maps this. It's fascinating because the baby's only 11 months old.
Yeah.
The baby immediately understands, I've lost connection with my mom.
Yep.
And so even at this young age, she can feel that disconnection. She can feel that rupture, even without words. And she does everything she can to try to bring her mom back into connection. So she smiles and she starts pointing at things like she's trying to get her mom to look. And she even puts her little hands up in her mom's face. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. But nothing works. And so the baby starts getting, understandably upset. Mm-hmm. she starts making a loud screeching sound because it's really just trying to get her mom's attention.
Yeah.
Sort of like she's saying, like, why are we not playing our game anymore?
Yeah.
And still there's no reaction. The baby just really becomes resigned and sort of slumps and throws her shoulders down. She turns away, and she sort of just, it's just really sad. I think it's a sad part because she's crying and she's just really frustrated because of the stress of this disconnection. And you can see how much it means to this child, right?
Well, I think what's so fascinating about it is you can see how much negative emotion an infant can have when they're under the stress of disconnection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so
absolutely.
Just in that short amount of time, they go from that connection to this clear disconnection. And then the baby's trying so hard to get that rhythm back. And she's willing to do whatever it takes to reestablish that connection. And then finally, the mom, under instruction, starts engaging back again with the baby. So the mom then raises her hands back in a way that the baby recognizes, like, oh, you're back. We're back. We're going to play this game again that we play together. And the baby starts to shift that emotion within seconds. That baby's emotion is back to being happy again.
And it's such a powerful reminder of how deeply we are wired for connection and repair.
Mm-hmm. And it all happens. I think that really tells us something very powerful, because infants in this whole interaction, it was not language dependent. That whole interaction between the mother and the baby happened completely without words.
Yeah.
So this disconnection is something that we feel at a neurological level.
Yeah. But even demonstrating how the repair process is, sometimes I think we repair process like patching a hole, and it's not. It's just sort of mending the gap. We pull away, and there's a gap, there's a distance, and then we come back together.
I love
right?
that.
Much sort of like the waves, right? So we're not like patching this ugly thing. We're just coming back together in this rhythm that we had established to begin with.
Oh, I love that.
And
because
it
otherwise
starts
you would
with
have
babies.
a wall full of patched holes.
Yeah. Or you could see your relationship as a wall through a patched holes. Right. But that's not how it should be. You could see your relationship as just moments of coming back together and moments of pulling apart.
Fantastic.
As the waves cycle. All right. So let's shift gears and talk about the actual process of repair. All right. Believe it or not, there is an actual process, right? And it comes down to the three key parts, right? So the first part is what happens inside of each of you. The second and third parts are what you actually do together.
Yeah. And so today, for the remainder of this episode, we're going to quickly focus on just the first part. And then next week and the week after that, we'll dig into the second and the third part. So
okay.
So
what would be the first step in repair? Well, it's probably the most important part. And it's the fact that you must have the willingness to move into repair in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the foundation. So the first order of business is getting centered in your wise, mature adult self, because the child doesn't want to repair, but your wise, mature adult self is interested in repair.
Exactly. So take a moment to do whatever helps you to regain that wise, mature adult, whatever it takes to get centered. Maybe that means walking to the kitchen to get you both a glass of water, like I suggested earlier. And the whole time you're walking to the kitchen, you're taking some deep breaths. You're doing some of the breath work exercises we've shared here on the podcast before. Or maybe you're just pausing for a moment and reminding yourself of that space between stimulus and response, that I have a choice. So while you're taking that break, this is when it's really important to remind yourself of something crucial. And that is to remind yourself that the person you are speaking to is someone you love and someone you care about. And the reason that you're having this conversation in the first place is to make something better in your relationship, not to make something worse. So don't make it worse. Remember, we're here to make something better. That adaptive child self is going to argue with you and try to keep you in that me consciousness, me, protect me, self-preservation mode. It's going to want to draw you back into one of those 7 losing strategies that we've talked about on past episodes.
But when you're going to take a moment and pause and you ask yourself, what you're going to say, like, okay, what's our goal here? Well, our goal is to make things better.
Yes.
And again, as Charlotte mentioned, this is someone I love. This is someone I care about. This is someone I want to build a better life with.
Right.
That's your prefrontal cortex talking, right? That's your wise adult self sort of stepping in, moving the child to the side, right?
Yes.
And then we shift back into the us consciousness rather than the me consciousness.
Yes. So the first step is entirely internal. It happens inside of you. You have to pull yourself out of that reactive state that you might be in and bring yourself back into a place where you're willing to make peace and willing That's the key word, willing to reconnect with your partner.
Yeah. And here's something really cool to understand. Your partner doesn't have to be at their best for you to bring your best self to the equation.
Ooh, I think I love this because I think so many times in repair, we sort of have that adaptive child thinking, which is transactional.
Right.
Well, I'll be a mature person when you're a mature person.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. But what we're saying is this is a unilateral thing. And so what does unilateral mean? It means that it's action that you take on your own where you don't need to have agreement from somebody else in order to take it.
Yeah, just bring in your best self.
So the best thing you can do if your partner is reactive or in a state of unhappiness is to get yourself back into a calm, centered state. And when you're centered, you can help them to then move back in towards harmony. Because remember, what we've talked about before is anxiety is contagious. Reactivity is contagious, but so is calm. So get yourself grounded so that you can guide your spouse, the person that you love, guide that energy back into connection with you. Help your spouse move back into connection. Just like the mother in that video, if you go watch it, just like that mother just had to do a few little things to be able to move and guide that baby back into connection.
Yeah. And that is step one.
Yes.
Right? And this starts with you. And it's probably the most important step. It's about being willing to pause, remembering the phrase, this is someone I love.
Yes.
Recognizing how critical it is to recruit the best version of yourself. And that's where repair and reconnection can begin.
Yes. So as we wrap up today's episode, remember that conflict is a natural part of all relationships. In fact, healthy relationships often experience more conflict because they know how to do it well. The key is understanding that all relationships go through this cycle of harmony, disharmony, and repair. It's a rhythm that we all experience: closeness, disconnection, and then a return to closeness.
So I want to cycle back to the beginning when I talked about the girl I dated who said that, she never wanted to have any disagreements, and think about what her parents taught her. And then I would think, so, her parents argued a lot. Now let's talk about people in your relationship, in your example with your children. And this is for the listeners. Are you having disagreements, or are you hiding those disagreements from your children?
Right.
Right. And oftentimes we do, like, oh no, I never saw my parents argue. My better question to you is, have you ever seen your parents repair? So the gift that we want the gift we want to give you, and the gift we want you to give to your children or your grandchildren, is a relationship where they see you go through the cycles kindly, with compassion, and they see you not only disagree, but they see you repair, and repair often. That would be an amazing gift to give your children, so that when they go into their next relationship, they can take those tools with them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right. So next week, we're going to dive deeper into the second and third parts of repair process. So don't miss these next two episodes as we wrap up this topic. So you can always subscribe to get notifications, on the app, so you don't miss an episode when we drop that. And if today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to leave a 5-star review. It helps us reach others who might benefit from these insights. And of course, if there's anyone that you feel like this episode might be beneficial, we'd love it if you would just share it with them, so that their relationship can move through repair process a lot smoother.
Great. So, you know what? Be kind to each other this week. Put each other first. Remember, it's the small things done often that make the greatest impact.